The German shepherd's bark pierced the solemn quiet of Riverside Funeral Home like a siren in the night. Gray light filtered through the narrow windows as Mason Reed lay motionless in his mahogany coffin, his weathered hands folded across his chest. But Duke, the scarred military dog everyone assumed would be silent in grief, wouldn't stop. His amber eyes fixed on the casket with an intensity that made the mourners shift uncomfortably. The funeral director moved to remove him, but Duke's hackles raised, his bark growing more desperate, more urgent. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And in 30 seconds, everyone in that room would witness something that would shatter everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his dog. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. 3 days earlier, Mason Reed had collapsed in his modest ranch house on the outskirts of Riverside, Montana. At 52, the former Army Ranger had survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, but his heart, weakened by decades of stress and trauma, had finally given out. Or so the medical examiner said. His death certificate listed cardiac arrest, natural causes, nothing suspicious. But Duke knew different. The 6-year-old German Shepherd had been by Mason's side since his retirement from active duty 4 years ago. Together, they'd worked as a K-9 unit in the Army's Special Operations Command, tracking insurgents through mountain caves and dusty villages. Duke's scarred body told stories of shrapnel and close calls, while his intelligent eyes revealed an almost human understanding of the world's cruelty. Now, standing in the funeral home, Duke refused to leave his position 3 feet from the casket. His body trembled, not with grief but with urgency. Every few seconds he'd bark, sharp, commanding barks that echoed off the wooden walls. Someone needs to remove that. Animal, whispered Patricia Holbrook, Mason's ex-wife, her perfectly manicured hands clutching a black handkerchief. At 48, she'd remarried a real estate developer and moved to California years ago. Her presence here surprised everyone who knew their bitter divorce. He's mourning, said Sarah Chen, 34, Mason's former partner from the Riverside Police Department. Her dark eyes watched Duke carefully. She'd worked with Mason and Duke on 3 separate cases before Mason's medical retirement. She knew that bark. It wasn't grief, it was alert. Mason's younger brother, Tom Reed, stepped forward. At 45, he still carried the family's military bearing despite never having served. Duke, come here, boy. Let Dad rest. But Duke didn't move. Instead, he placed his front paws on the edge of the casket, his nose inches from Mason's face. Then he did something that made the blood drain from every face in the room. He began digging at the casket's satin lining, his claws scraping against the wood, his barks becoming frantic howls. What happened next would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. "Get that dog away from my brother!" Tom shouted, lunging forward. But Sarah Chen was faster. Years of police training kicked in as she held up her hand. "Wait! Everyone stop!" Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd learned to trust her instincts in dangerous situations. Duke's behavior wasn't random. Sarah had seen him work before. The way his body tensed when he detected explosives, how his bark changed pitch when he found what he was searching for. This was the same bark. He'd found something. "I need everyone to step back," Sarah said, her hand already reaching for her phone. The funeral director, a nervous man in his 60s named Gerald Moss, wrung his hands. "Miss Chen, this is highly irregular. Call 911, Sarah commanded. "Now." As Gerald fumbled for his phone, Sarah approached the casket. Duke's eyes met hers, and she saw desperation there. The dog pawed at Mason's chest, right over his heart, then barked twice, the signal he'd been trained to give when detecting a living person in rubble. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She pressed her fingers against Mason's neck, feeling for a pulse she knew couldn't be there. The man had been dead for 3 days. The medical examiner had certified it, but her training screamed at her to check anyway. At first, nothing, just cold skin. Then, so faint she almost missed it, a flutter. Weak, barely there, but present. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "He's alive." Chaos erupted. Patricia Holbrook screamed. Tom Reed stood frozen in shock. Gerald Moss dropped his phone. But Sarah was already in motion, her CPR training taking over as she pulled Mason from the casket with strength she didn't know she possessed. "Someone call an ambulance!" she shouted, laying Mason on the floor. Duke hovered over his master's face, licking it frantically, as if trying to will life back into the body. Sarah began chest compressions, counting under her breath. Mason's skin was cold, his lips blue, but that pulse, that impossible, miraculous pulse, continued its faint rhythm beneath her hands. Neither could have known then that this moment would uncover a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of Riverside's government, or that Duke's loyalty would cost him everything. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes, a lifetime when every second counted. Paramedics burst through the funeral home doors, their faces showing the shock Sarah felt. Dead men didn't come back, not after 3 days. But Mason Reed wasn't dead. He was barely alive, trapped in a state the doctors would later call suspended animation, his heart rate so slow, his breathing so shallow, that he'd been mistaken for dead. "How is this possible?" demanded Dr. Lisa Martinez, 38, the emergency room physician at Riverside General Hospital. She stood over Mason's bed 3 hours later, watching monitors that showed vital signs that shouldn't exist. The medical examiner pronounced him. There was a death certificate. Sarah Chen sat beside Duke in the hospital corridor, her mind racing. Something was very wrong. She pulled out her phone and called her former lieutenant James Wheeler, now retired but still the sharpest investigator she knew. "Sarah, it's Sunday. This better be. Mason Reed is alive." Silence. Then what? The medical examiner declared him dead 3 days ago. Duke found him alive at his own funeral. "Jim, I need you to look into something. Who performed Mason's examination?" She heard papers rustling. "Give me an hour." While Sarah waited, Patricia Holbrook cornered her in the hallway. Up close, Sarah could see the cracks in her composed facade, red eyes, trembling hands. "I need to see him." "Why? You divorced him 5 years ago." Patricia's face crumpled. "Because I still love him. Because I made a mistake. Because—" She stopped, fear flickering across her features. "Because I think I know what happened to him." Before Sarah could respond, Tom Reed appeared, his face pale. "We need to talk. All of us. Privately." They gathered in an empty hospital room. Sarah, Patricia, Tom, and Dr. Martinez. Duke lay at Sarah's feet, his eyes never leaving the door. Tom's voice shook as he spoke. 2 weeks ago, Mason called me. He said he'd discovered something about our father's death, something that proved it wasn't an accident. He looked at each of them. He said if anything happened to him, I should assume it was murder. The moment that followed would change everything. Lieutenant Wheeler called back within the hour, his voice tight. The medical examiner who signed Mason's death certificate was Dr. Richard Vance. He's been with Riverside County for 15 years, clean record. But, Sarah pressed, but 3 other suspicious deaths in the past 6 months, all signed off by Vance. All wealthy individuals or those involved in local government investigations. All labeled natural causes. Sarah's jaw clenched. Mason was investigating something. Get this. Your boy Mason had been looking into a series of property deals involving Tom Reed's construction company and a development firm called Clearwater Holdings. Apparently, several ranch owners died under mysterious circumstances, and their land was seized and sold for pennies on the dollar. Patricia spoke up, her voice barely a whisper. My husband owns Clearwater Holdings. The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. Stephen Holbrook, Patricia continued, tears streaming down her face. We married 2 years ago. He's not a good man. I didn't know at first. But 6 months ago I found documents, plans to acquire land through questionable means. When I confronted him, he threatened me, said if I told anyone I'd have an accident too. Tom's face had gone white. Patricia, are you saying my brother was murdered, that someone tried to kill him and make it look natural? Dr. Martinez interrupted, her medical knowledge cutting through the speculation. The symptoms Sarah described, the suspended animation state, it's consistent with a rare class of toxins. Compounds that slow the heart rate to nearly undetectable levels, mimic death but don't actually kill. They're used in certain medical procedures, but in the wrong hands. She trailed off, the implications clear. Duke suddenly stood, his body rigid, a low growl emanating from his chest. The door to the hospital room opened, and a nurse entered. Except Sarah's hand immediately went to her hip, where her service weapon would have been if she were on duty. The nurse had the wrong walk, the wrong eyes, and Duke's growl told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't medical staff, this was the person who'd come to finish the job. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another heartwarming tale like this. Everyone stay calm, the fake nurse said, pulling a syringe from her pocket. In her early 30s, she had cold blue eyes that betrayed years of professional violence. Mr. Reed shouldn't have woken up. We're here to correct that mistake. Duke launched himself forward, but the woman was ready. She grabbed a metal tray and swung it at the dog. It connected with Duke's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Sarah tackled the woman before she could aim the syringe, both crashing into the hospital equipment. Tom grabbed Patricia, pulling her toward the door, while Dr. Martinez hit the emergency call button. The syringe skittered across the floor. The assassin was trained. She broke free from Sarah's grip with a practiced move, her elbow connecting with Sarah's jaw. Stars exploded in Sarah's vision, but years of police training kept her in the fight. She swept the woman's legs, bringing her down hard. Duke recovered, blood matting his fur, and clamped his jaws around the woman's arm. She screamed, dropping a phone that had been in her other hand. Sarah grabbed it before it could hit the ground. Security guards burst through the door, followed by real medical staff. Within minutes, the woman was subdued, handcuffed, and being led away by Riverside police officers who'd responded to the hospital's emergency call. Sarah looked at the phone she'd grabbed. It was unlocked, showing a text conversation. The last message, sent 10 minutes ago, made her blood run cold. Patient awake. Eliminating now. Holbrook sends regards. Tom read over her shoulder, his face ashen. Stephen Holbrook, Patricia's husband. He ordered a hit on Mason. On my brother. Patricia collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner. I should have. You're saying something now, Sarah said firmly. That's what matters. But Duke wasn't finished. While everyone processed what had happened, the German Shepherd limped to the phone Sarah still held, pawed at it, then barked once. His training, his instincts, told him there was more to find. Sarah scrolled through the messages and what she discovered made her realize that Mason's investigation had uncovered something far bigger than a few suspicious property deals. This conspiracy reached into every corner of Riverside's power structure, and they'd almost gotten away with it. Lieutenant Wheeler arrived at the hospital within the hour, bringing with him enough evidence to bury Stephen Holbrook and his associates for life. The messages on the assassin's phone led to a network of corruption that stretched back a decade. Mason stumbled onto it by accident, Wheeler explained, spreading documents across the hospital conference room table. His father's death 6 years ago. It wasn't an accident. Robert Reed owned 500 acres of prime development land. He refused to sell. 1 month later, he died of an apparent heart attack. The medical examiner? Richard Vance. The same one who declared Mason dead, Sarah breathed. Exactly. After Robert's death, the land went to Mason and Tom. Tom's construction company was struggling, so Stephen Holbrook offered him a partnership. Clearwater Holdings would buy the land for development. Tom would get a percentage. Tom didn't know the land was worth triple what they were offering. Tom's voice cracked. I trusted him. I signed the papers. And Mason started asking questions because he found Dad's old journals, notes about threats he'd received, about being pressured to sell. Mason went to the district attorney, Wheeler continued, but the DA is on Holbrook's payroll. Instead of investigating, they called Holbrook. That's when Mason became a target. Patricia spoke up, her voice stronger now. Stephen came home that night furious. He was on the phone with someone. I heard him say, take care of the Reed problem permanently. I didn't know what it meant then. I do now. Dr. Martinez had been quietly listening. Now she interjected with clinical precision. The toxin used on Mason is called tetrodotoxin, derived from pufferfish. In precise doses, it mimics death so perfectly that even trained medical examiners can be fooled. But the victim remains aware, trapped in their own body, slowly suffocating unless revived. Sarah felt sick. Mason was conscious during his own funeral? Likely yes, though paralyzed and unable to communicate. If Duke hadn't detected the faint life signs, The CO2 from Mason's minimal breathing. He would have died for real within hours. Duke, bandaged but alert, pressed against Sarah's leg. This brave, scarred warrior had saved his master from a fate worse than death, being buried alive. The door opened. A nurse appeared, this time genuine, her face urgent. "Detective Chen? Mr. Reed is awake. He's asking for Duke." Mason Reed opened his eyes to find Duke's scarred face inches from his own. The dog's amber eyes held a mixture of relief and fierce protectiveness that needed no translation. Tears streamed down Mason's weathered cheeks as he raised a weak hand to stroke Duke's head. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice raw. "Such a good boy." Sarah stood at the foot of the bed, watching the reunion with a lump in her throat. Tom sat in a chair, head in his hands, while Patricia hovered near the door, uncertain of her place. Mason's gaze found each of them in turn. When he spoke, every word took effort. "How long?" "3 days," Sarah answered. "You were pronounced dead." "They almost buried you, Mason." Duke wouldn't let them. Understanding flickered in Mason's eyes. He looked at his dog with profound gratitude. He knew. He always knows. "Mason," Tom began, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know about Holbrook. About any of it. I just wanted to save the company, to honor Dad's legacy, and instead You were used," Mason interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "We both were. But it's over now. Wheeler told me the DA's been arrested. Holbrook's in custody. Vance lost his medical license, and he's facing murder charges for 4 deaths. Patricia stepped forward hesitantly. "Mason, You came back," Mason said simply. "When it mattered, you came back. You warned them. That takes courage." She nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Martinez entered, her professional demeanor barely concealing her amazement. "Mr. Reed, you should be dead. By every medical standard I know, you shouldn't have survived. Your heart was beating twice per minute. Your oxygen levels were catastrophic. But here you are." Mason smiled weakly, his hand still resting on Duke's head. "I had a reason to fight. This stubborn mutt wouldn't let me go." Duke licked Mason's face, his tail wagging for the first time since the ordeal began. Outside, dawn broke over Riverside, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a second chance, a miracle that defied every law of medicine and probability. But those who knew Duke understood. Loyalty doesn't bow to probability. Love doesn't surrender to death. The trial of Stephen Holbrook became national news. The evidence was overwhelming. Text messages, financial records, testimony from the assassin who'd turned state's witness. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on 4 counts of murder, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Dr. Richard Vance, the corrupt medical examiner, received 20 years for his role in falsifying death certificates and covering up murders. The district attorney, along with 3 city council members on Holbrook's payroll, faced their own trials. But for Mason Reed and those who loved him, justice was only part of the healing. 6 months after his miraculous resurrection, Mason stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching the sun set over Montana's rolling hills. Duke sat beside him, the dog's scars visible but his spirit unbroken. The ranch, his father's legacy, would never be sold. Tom had dissolved his partnership with Clearwater Holdings and was rebuilding his construction company honestly, one project at a time. Patricia had divorced Stephen immediately. She'd moved back to Riverside, not to rekindle romance with Mason, that ship had sailed, but to rebuild a friendship founded on truth and shared trauma. Some wounds heal better when faced together. Sarah Chen visited weekly, often bringing her teenage daughter, Maya, who'd fallen in love with Duke's story. The girl wanted to become a K-9 officer when she grew up. "You changed everything, you know," Sarah told Mason one evening as they watched Maya play fetch with Duke in the yard. "Not just for yourself. You exposed corruption that was destroying this town. 4 families got justice because you wouldn't stop asking questions." Mason shook his head. "I didn't do anything. I was lying in a coffin, helpless. But Duke didn't give up on you, and that's what matters." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes the most profound truths are the ones that don't need words at all. Duke knew you were still in there, still fighting. He refused to let anyone give up." Duke trotted back to the porch, dropping a tennis ball at Mason's feet. His tail wagged, his amber eyes bright with simple joy. Mason threw the ball, watching his faithful companion race across the grass. A warrior's spirit can be wounded, but it can't be broken, not when bound by love and loyalty. The story of Mason Reed and Duke sparked something in Riverside that no one anticipated. Within weeks, the town council passed new legislation requiring multiple medical examinations before death certificates could be issued. The police department implemented stricter oversight of investigations involving wealthy or politically connected individuals. But the real change happened in the hearts of ordinary people. Lieutenant Wheeler came out of retirement to help rebuild the police department's integrity, bringing Sarah Chen on as his deputy. Together, they created a new K-9 unit, one that would honor the bond between Duke and Mason by training more dogs to save lives. Tom Reed's construction company became a model for ethical business practices. He donated the profits from his father's land, which was finally sold at fair market value, to establish the Robert Reed Foundation, providing support for veterans struggling with PTSD and helping military dogs find homes after their service. Dr. Martinez launched a medical research initiative studying near-death states and the potential for revival in cases previously deemed hopeless. Her work would eventually save 17 lives across the country, including a child trapped under rubble for 4 days after an earthquake. Even Patricia found purpose. She became an advocate for victims of domestic abuse and financial coercion, using her experience with Stephen Holbrook to help others recognize warning signs and escape dangerous relationships. The assassin who'd tried to finish Mason, a woman named Kelly Nash who'd been coerced into killing after Holbrook threatened her sister, testified at her own trial about the network of violence she'd been trapped in. Her cooperation led to the exposure of a nationwide contract killing operation. She received a reduced sentence and dedicated her time in prison to teaching other women self-defense and how to resist manipulation. As for Mason and Duke, they lived quietly on the ranch, training young K-9 officers and hosting veterans who needed a safe place to heal. Mason never fully recovered his strength, but he didn't need to. He'd survived the impossible. He'd exposed evil. He'd been given a second chance at life. And through it all, Duke remained at his side, scarred, loyal, and forever vigilant. The bonds forged through adversity strengthened not just individuals but entire communities. 2 years after the funeral that never was, Riverside held a ceremony honoring Duke with the Medal of Valor, the first time in the town's history a dog had received such recognition. Mason stood on the stage, Duke sitting proudly beside him as the mayor presented the award. "This dog did what none of us could," the mayor said, her voice carrying across the crowded town square. "He saw what we missed. He refused to accept what everyone else believed. And because of his loyalty, his courage, and his unwavering dedication, a good man lived, and an entire network of corruption was brought down." The crowd erupted in applause. Mason knelt beside Duke, fastening the medal to the dog's collar. Duke's tail wagged once, as if to say it was all in a day's work. That evening, back at the ranch, Mason sat on his porch with Sarah, Tom, Patricia, and Lieutenant Wheeler. Maya Chen sprawled on the floor, Duke's head resting in her lap as she gently stroked his scarred ears. "I think about that moment a lot," Mason said quietly, "being trapped in that coffin, aware but unable to move or speak. Hearing all of you, wanting to scream that I was alive but having no voice." He paused, emotion thick in his throat, and then hearing Duke, knowing he knew. "That was when I knew I'd survive, because he wouldn't let me die." Sarah raised her glass. To Duke, the best partner any of us could ask for. They all drank, even Maya, who'd been given sparkling cider for the occasion. As the stars emerged over Montana's vast sky, Mason looked at the people gathered around him. Broken people who'd been made whole, lost people who'd found purpose, a community healed by truth and bound by loyalty. And at the center of it all sat a scarred German shepherd with amber eyes, whose love had defied death itself. Some miracles come from above, others come on 4 legs, with scars that tell stories and a heart that refuses to quit. Duke was both. In our twilight years, when life has taught us the hard lessons about loss and betrayal, it's easy to forget that miracles still exist. Mason Reed's story reminds us that sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures or powerful institutions. but from the unwavering loyalty of a friend who refuses to give up on us. Duke didn't have the power to save Mason through medical intervention. He couldn't order investigations or arrest corrupt officials. All he had was his bark, his instincts, and his absolute refusal to accept that his partner was gone. And that was enough. This story teaches us that true strength isn't in never falling. It's in having someone who won't let you stay down. It's in the bonds we forge through shared trauma and mutual sacrifice. It's in the courage to speak up when everyone else stays silent, even if your voice is just a bark in a quiet funeral home. Look around you today. Who are the Dukes in your life? The ones who see you when you're invisible, who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself, who refuse to let darkness win. Honor them. Protect them. Because loyalty like that is rarer than gold and more valuable than any fortune. And if you've ever been the Duke for someone else, if you've ever stood firm when others walked away, if you've ever fought for someone who couldn't fight for themselves, know that your courage matters more than you'll ever understand. Humanity still exists in dark times. Good people are out there if you look, and sometimes they have 4 legs and a heart bigger than the world itself. Remember, a warrior's spirit can be wounded, but it can't be broken, not when bound by love and loyalty. That truth transcends species, time, and even death itself. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.